Life is all about choices. As a writer, as an author, as a poet, as anything else, a lot of choices are up to you. What are you going to write? Who's going to be your character? What are their names? What's the situation going to be? What's the setting? What's the objective? What's the goal? What's the drama? What's the conflict? All this other stuff. There are an awful lot of choices that actually are not up to you. If you're putting together a manuscript that you want to submit to an editor or an agent or even to a self-publishing company, they want a specific font, size, and spacing. Typically, they want Times New Roman 12-point double space. It is clear. It's easy to read. It's the same type that's going to be in the finished manuscript, so they'll know what it will look like on the page. And by double spacing, they can make notes, they can make highlights, they can, make whatever suggestions they want to make. I have known some people that, it's self-publishing, so you can really do whatever you want. They like getting creative with their fonts. They like getting the fancy ones. And yes, it does look pretty unique, and sometimes it really looks nice. But when you're writing in a particular font, remember that it has to be easy on the eyes, because you can get eye fatigue with really, really wild, crazy fonts. If you read the cover font on a Dr. Seuss book is one specific type, and it's supposed to be in the same style as Dr. Seuss's writing. That's on the cover. Inside, the main font, the stuff that the kids have to read, is not block letter. It's very specific and everything because it's easy on the eyes. It will not distract or discourage a child, and it will help them pick up the sounds and the words easier. When it comes to designing your cover art, if you're doing self-publishing, you have some leeway with that. Some publishers will allow you to submit artwork or a design or something that you want to use. Sometimes they will make suggestions. Sometimes they will just say, no, we do that. When you're coming up with cover art, give yourself room. I made that mistake early on with the Roadhouse Sun, and I was kind of stuck having to keep one specific style. Even though it was a stock photo, we wanted to change it each time, and sometimes it was a pain in the neck. Give yourself room to grow. When I did my history book on the town of Burke, I had a picture of Burke Mountain. My story was called In the Shadow of Old Burke Mountain. So I wanted that particular mountain to be prominently displayed on the cover. And I think to justify why she was charging her boss this exorbitant rate, she came up with a couple of other designs. Well, looking at it, I think that these might be a little better. One was a plain green cover with a black box with white lettering and white trim around it with my title, my subtitle, and my name. Boring. Another one reminded me of when my kids were little. There were these 3D books and 3D posters. It would be this one image repeated over and over again, and if you pressed your nose against it, it would turn into some 3D picture of allegedly, a parrot or some other foolish thing that I don't know what the person making this was microdosing on, but to somebody who was stone cold sober, it bore about as much resemblance to a parrot as it did a penguin or a persimmon. Anyhow, that was the other thing they suggested. How do you feel about these? I'm sorry, ma'am. I was brought up to be a gentleman. You don't want to know how I felt about those. So I insisted on using that picture, and I'm still glad I did. So that you might have some choice and have some expression. Your cover art should somehow or other relate to what's going to be inside. The only way they could justify the other two cover designs as having anything to do with the history of Burke, Vermont, was the fact that Vermont was the Green Mountain State, and one cover was green, and it was set in rural Vermont, and the other cover had trees. It's okay to have a design. It's okay to have suggestions and sit and talk with your editor and your agent. But if you are picked up by a publishing house, they're going to have their own art department. But they are not going to put elephants on the cover of a book dealing with a serial killer. To the best of my knowledge, I have never known of any pachyderm serial killers. And you know that the publishing house, because they have just paid you in advance, they have bought your book, they're going to want to make money. They're going to want to make sure it's going to be something gripping and bold and Bob's your uncle. They're going to give you a really good design, because otherwise they end up eating it, and they don't want to do that. Your artistic expression might be limited to your writing, but remember, if you are a writer, that might be the most important way. Get creative.